from China's forced labor. The Chinese Communist Party has long regarded millions of prisoners in China as a source of free labor for both the domestic and the export economy. In addition to the prisoners who have been sentenced through China's regular judicial system, there are untold numbers of prisoners who are part of China's less formal but no less brutal re-education through labor system. It is in fact through implementation of the Laojiao economy that Xinjiang region has been transformed into the largest cotton production area in China. As part of its strategy to suppress the Uyghur people, the CCP has started to move its primary textile and garment industry from coastal areas to Xinjiang. At the same time, China has forced over 1 million Uyghurs into so-called vocational schools and forced them to work in the factories to produce a cheap, steady supply of manufactured goods. Today, on behalf of Citizen Power Initiative for China, I'm now formally releasing our report, Cotton, the Fabric Full of Lies, a report on forced and prison labor in Xinjiang, China, and the nexus to global supply chains. The report shows that every link of the cotton textile garment supply chain in Xinjiang is adulterated by forced labor, and as a result, should be banned from importation into the United States. Now, let me introduce the speakers today. First is my colleague, Dr. Lian Chaohan. He's the Vice President of Citizen Power Initiative for China. He is the author of the report. He will talk to you about what he has found in this research. And we have Mr. Tahir Hamid. Tahir Hamid. He was a victim of the forced labor in Xinjiang. And we have Luisa Riva. She is the Director for External Affairs of the Uyghur Human Rights Project, a worldwide respect human rights champion. So she does not need much introduction. With no further ado, I will give floor to Dr. Lian Chaohan.
Thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming to this event. Thank you for your interest and your support. I also want to thank my team that helped to produce this report. First of all, Dr. Jiali for his leadership, and also David Wang, Anna Chen, and Amelia, who made a great contribution to this work. Before I begin, I just want to clarify two terms. Sometimes it's a little beconfusion. In Xinjiang region, there are two governments. One is Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Another one is ex-PCC, which is the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps. And this one, both are the first one is a provincial level government. The second one is quasi-provincial level government. Can you lower the volume, please? Lower the volume. XPCC is a paramilitary group, which is very unique in China. Their main focus is to produce, at the same time, to maintain security, border security, now more and more they get into suppressing Uyghurs, activists, and human rights activists. So then the second term I want to clarify, we're talking about two forced labors here. Two types of forced labor. One that is under judicial system in the formal prison of China. Another one is actual judicial system, which is under so-called re-education camp and vocational training centers. So I just want to clarify that two things before we move on. And as we know, Xinjiang has become a major cotton producer in China, the largest. They produced almost 84% of total output of China. And about the Xinjiang, how do you pronounce that? A-U-A-R? The input.
X-U-A-R.
X-U-A-R. Yeah, okay. They produce about, like 50% of the entire nation output. And XPCC produce about 33.5%. This is a very, very large. And they both of the government produce, they export, like 43% of the Xinjiang autonomous region produce, export the cotton, textile, and garment products. These supply chains their supply chains reached out to the entire China and globally. And the network, for example, just use Xinjiang XPCC Cotton Company. They have a network can reach out to every area in China that use cotton products. They also have many channels, including direct sales online from the online platform like Alibaba, Yulin Cotton. And they have third parties like Lutai textile company that supply for international brands. And this Lutai company is quite interesting. They work closely with prison enterprises. And they're the suppliers for Burberry, Calvin Klein, Hugo Boss, Gucci, Armani, and Uniqlo. They have, with these channels, all the products, cotton textile products from Xinjiang reached out to the international market. So far, Xinjiang is the largest the forced labor hub. And in the judicial system of Xinjiang, of both governments, they have a total number of 85 prisons and labor camps. And they're continuing to build new prisons in there. This is a mag prisons. It's not what we think smaller one, because each prison has a satellite prisons. For example, Changji prison has 11 satellite prisons. Each of these prisons, they all have their own enterprises, producing cotton products, textile products. They're continuing to build more mega prison. For example, Yuhe prison is a major one. It's under construction right now. And so the total number, we don't know. It's a government secret, how they got it. but we estimated, based on different data, it's between 500,000 to 800,000 prisoners. China has a long history of using forced labor to produce and to reform them. So the purpose is very much like Stalin's Gulag. They both punish and banish the counter-revolutionaries and criminals. And also through the hard labor, they can change the bad elements into so-called good citizens. And inmates also contribute to society. But basically, it's making money for the state. The reason they choose Xinjiang as a hub started in the early 50s, since communists took power. And because it's a remote location, and also a very harsh desert environment, and the low cost. Xinjiang can run the prison, one prison like a 1/10 of the cost that compared to the interior of China. And then it is also ease the pressure of overcrowding issue in the coastal provinces, and it provide abundant labor sources for Xinjiang development and colonization. Can you lower the volume? It's just a little echoing. So we found the government data that shows since from 1957 to 75, there are about between like 100,000 prisoners to 200,000 prisoners that shipped into Xinjiang. And from 83 to 2000, about 85,000 prisoners that moved to Xinjiang. So today, Xinjiang continue to receive large number of prisoners as a forced labor. At the beginning, all this labor, all these prisoners in Xinjiang, they were work routinely on the cotton fields. They reclaim cotton fields. They built roads, they built reservoirs, irrigation system. They laid foundation, infrastructure for Xinjiang at the time. And one particular case we found, his name is Gan Cui, who is a student of Beijing Renmin University. And he stayed in that prison for over 20 years. His main job is to reclaim cotton fields, which is very hard labor. And he also witnessed that entire labor camp, the death of the entire labor camp during the starvation, during the famine. This since 2009, after the uprising, after the protests in Xinjiang, the Chinese government come up with different ideas of educate, transform Xinjiang Uyghur. And until 2014, and they continue to explore different way to do this transformation, which is pretty much based on their experience in crash to suppress Falun Gong. And in 2014, they come up with a new strategy, which is using the cotton textile garment industry as a way. It's a combined strategy to so-called de-extremization of Uyghurs and stable, maintain stability in Xinjiang, at the same time create jobs. I think their thinking is using using economic performance to legitimize Xi Jinping's rules over Xinjiang. And it's a one stone, many birds kind of approach. So they take, when they implemented this strategy, they talk lots of, and they still take many Uyghurs into these vocational schools and re-education camps. And they also ask the textile garment production, the companies from the interior move into Xinjiang, create this massive expansion of industry. And so under this massive expansion plan, they call it one textile cities, 7 industrial parks, and 1 center. That plan, all this, I just want to use one example. There's 3 cities, like a Shihezi city, which is they call it the Shihezi Industrial City. This is under jurisdiction of their 8th division of CPCC. They have 4 mega prisons in that region. And Karla City, which is 2nd division, they have 4 mega prison nearby. And Aroa City, which is 1st division, they have 8 divisions in the neighborhood. You can see all this forced labor, all this so-called new plan expansion based on the center around this forced labor hubs. Under the plan, they also they want to create about 1 million new jobs in textile industry, and so they even formed a leading group in each government, each level of government, to promote job creation in this industry. So we saw the documents from the government documents, which ordered all this country level government to come up to create vocational camp, education training camp. So they also using this is an interesting concept. It's called FJH, which means visiting the people, listening to the people, 访聚会. It's the massive dispatch of government officials to villages, to every villages, to maintain so-called stability. So almost 8,000 villages, they all have this type of team stationed there. And they would, under the government document, they would screening who should take into the re-education camp, vocational camp, schools. And this vocational school is not just really training your skill. They also have major components that is, indoctrinate with CPP thoughts, Xi Jinping thoughts. They force them to learn to support the government policy, security policy, and they also force them to learn Chinese language. And at the same time, they train them to the skill on the machine, on the textile machine, sewing machine, and then they taught them to work in the nearby factories. So since the plan implemented, over 2,200 new textile garment factories set up in Xinjiang. Maybe over almost like 700 come from interior China. And one of these companies, Li Hua, who is a enterprise, prison enterprise, each year they take about 8,000, those campers, those camp inmates into their production. And Huafu Fashion and Lutai Textile also actively involved in this work, participate in taking the people from the vocational school into their production, into their system. And all this 2,200 companies all participate in this project, in this program, basically create jobs. About almost 500,000 new jobs created this way. So we can see, because what I'm trying to say, there's a policy specifically say who should be the priority, to be hired, and they specifically say those poor, from poor, impoverished households, and the relatives of three types of people, which is jailed prisoners, and detained, and those education campers, the inmates. So these are those type of people. So some of them, of course, might be voluntary into the workforce, and most of them probably forced into that production workforce. All right, on the existing forced labor under the judicial system, we have 85 prisons. It's not 75, but it's 85 prisons with the satellite prisons. That is a huge number of forced labor. So they also each, under the two different systems, they have companies that directly handle all this, all the productions. And under the autonomous region, they have this company called Huaxin Zuian Jituan. This is a conglomerate. It's a big company with 24 subsidiaries. Most of them are into cotton, textile, garment production. One of this company called Qixin provide export lots of high-end suits, and some probably end up in the U.S. market. Then there's so I'm just going to move on. I think the time I don't have enough time, but I'm just, there's other type under different judicial education. Correction Bureau also has this company that very big, that with 15 companies in them. They're very diversified, but cotton, textile, garments still the main products for them. And some of these companies already into hotel, into machinery, construction, so many different things. But main production is always cotton, textile, garment, because this is a labor intensive, and prison labor, forced labor is perfect for this type of work. So the reason we argue that the entire the products, cotton, textile, garment products are tainted by forced labor, because from the forced labor in under judicial system actual judicial system, they all participate in producing cottons, in making garment products. And also, we have to remember all this infrastructure, they were made, they were like fields, cotton fields, reclaimed by the forced laborers, most of them. And the roads constructed by the forced labor, and building materials, constructions, reservoir, particularly irrigation system, for example. Recently, we have this system they call it transfer water from the north to south. That system, that project, because they want to move the water from river from north to the south, they use to provide water for this oil field, Caramai, and then at the same time irrigate the fields, cotton fields along the way. So that the central government provide 1/3 cost investment, and the oil company provide another 1/3, and the third one is the Xinjiang itself provide 1/3. Xinjiang, to save the cost, of course, they use forced labor to do the dirty work. So they had dispatched all the inmates, many inmates from all their system, worked for 9 years to finish that irrigation system, which is like almost a kilometer, 1,000 kilometer canal, irrigation canal, and 5 reservoirs, 3 power plants, hydro power plants. So those stuff, it's fundamentally produced by the forced labor. And whatever they're sourcing in that region is forced labor, is tainted by the forced labor. That's why we're saying, everything comes from Xinjiang, even from China. All the products, cotton, textile, and garment products are tainted, adulterated. So the new development, I was mentioning a little bit about new developments. Since the trade war, the Chinese company feel like squished. Xinjiang's production in cotton, textile, garment industry dropped by 10%. And Huafu Fashion, their order dropped by 30%. The reason is they refused to interview by Wall Street Journal, and there was the inspection request issued to look at their forced labor and human rights situation, and so that caused Target stopped outsourcing sourcing from them, Adidas and H&M sourcing from them, and Lu Tai also affected by this trade conflict, but they always produce the high-end products, so they can sustain. Even they move some of their production order into Southeast Asia. They also affected. But what's interesting is that some of the not well-hidden prison enterprises, the government ordered them to stop taking orders, international orders, entirely. So that means to avoid so-called policy risk. That is the admission of guilt by the CCP. And then now they have to hide, lay low for now. So with that, I can see the cotton is the fabric that full of lies and also full of tears, sweat, and blood. So maybe it's time to start importation from Xinjiang on any cotton, textile, and garment production products. Thank you.
Now we have Mr. Parhi Pamuk.
Good afternoon.
This is mine.
Good afternoon. My name is Tahir Ahmed. I am a Uyghur poet and a film director. Because my English is not good, so I will speak in Uyghur, my native language, Zubaira, and I will interpret my speech. Thank you. Ben Şarq Türkistan'ınki Qashqa viloyatida tug'ilgan. Ham shu yerda cho'ng bo'lgan. Ham kichkinligimdan meniki ma'nai ta'sir qilgan bir ish. Mening ota-onam dehqon. Ular men aqlimni bilsam, ular ashar deb atilgan bir haqsiz emgaklar shu.
I was born and grew up in the city of Kashgar in East Turkestan. And since I was little, I had a strong impression of my parents being forced to do a labor. In Chinese grammar called volunteer, but in fact it's a forced labor.
Har yili kuz faslida yerli hukumat dehqonlar tashkillab o'stam shepish, bo'zga echish, paxta terish qatorliq nurg'unlagan haqsiz emgaklar soldi.
Each winter, local government organized all farmers to dig camels, pick cotton, and to cultivate bare land.
Endi bu emgaklarning hammasi butunlay haqsiz. Bu dehqonlar butunlay haqsiz emgak qiladi. Agar uyingizda kasallik tufaylidan yoki oila ishi yo'q boramisa va emgak qatnashamisa, u o'rniga odam tepib ketish kerak yoki pul to'lash kerak.
For these labor, they were not paid for anything. Also, when they are sick or have family emergencies and cannot participate, they were asked to find another person to take their place or pay.
Endi bunda emgaklar shunday istilohlaysizda dehqonlarga ig'ir bir zulm bo'lgan. Bu tugamas bir zulmga aylangan.
This kind of labor, in fact, for the farmers were very miserable and it's kind of punishment.
Keyin men maktabga kirdim. Boshlang'ich maktabni tartiblar, maktab bizni tashkillab har xil emgaklarga solibdi. Shu kichik vaqtlarimizni tartiblar, paxta terdik, hayvonotlarni qirg'ini jig'atdik, etizlikni dehqonchilik ishlarini qildik.
Later, when I started elementary school, my school started to arrange or organize my forced labor or volunteer, so-called volunteer labor. And each fall and winter time, we had to pick cotton and collect animal feces. And this kind of work continued.
Bunda emgaklar bir tarafdan o'qib, bir tarafdan qilgan emgaklar faqat tugamagachga ham ota-onamning besini bana pek ziyade tasdik qilg'achqa, men shu chog'ni tartiblar, men mangu dehqon bo'lmayman, cho'qim yaxshi o'qib, oliy maktabga berib, cho'ng shaharda yashayman degan bir niyatni o'zimga shu chiqib o'zimga qildim.
Since that kind of harsh labor affected my family and parents, and from that time I told myself to study hard, go to college, and stay in the big cities, and to never be a farmer again.
1992-yili men Turkiyaga o'qishga chiqmoqchi bo'lib, chegaradan chiqayotgan chog'da meni Xitoy hukumati nozik materiallarni chegaradan chiqmoqchi bo'lgan degan bir batnom bilan tutdi chegarada.
On February 1992. Sorry, okay, it's 96. On February 1996, on my way to study abroad to Turkey, I was arrested at the border for taking sensitive materials to abroad.
bu chegirda tutilgandan keyin meni Urumchiga olib keldi. Urumchida men Ko'ktog' saqchi qamoqxonasida 18 oy qamoqda o'tirdim.
And after I was stopped at the border, I was taken to the Urumchi, and then I was detained in Urumchi Ko'ktog' police station, detention camp. And that detention center I stayed for 18 months.
97 yılı 8. ayda meni sotsializmga kompartiyaga qarshi harakatlar shug'ullangan degan bir jinoyat bilan 3 yillik emgak bilan tarbiyalashga hukm qildi.
On August 1997, and the authorities accused me that I have involved in
Sotsializmga kompartiyaga qarshi.
okay, I was involved in activities against CCT and the social system, and I was sentenced for 3 years of re-education through labor and sent to Qashqar labor camp.
Bu emgaklarni tarbiyalash o'rnida ayni chog'da aymagu meniki shu chog'dagi ashustimdan chiqarib o'tilgan. Bu meni emgaklarni tarbiyalash chiqarib o'tilgan.
Okay, this is the verdict letter of him sentencing for 3 years to re-educate through labor. This is a document.
Andan keyin shu emgaklarni tarbiyalash o'rnida 250 ga yaqin Bunlar bu emgaklarni tarbiyalanuvchi. Bularning mutlaq ko'pi Uyg'ur. Andan keyin bularning 250 siyosiy jinoyatchi, ya'ni o'zining diniy e'tiqodi, milliy kimligi yoki siyosiy ko'zqarash tufaylidan shu emgaklarni tarbiyalash hukm qilingan.
This Qashqar camp, labor camp, has nearly 350 prisoners who were all of them are beggars, and 230 of them are political prisoners, which were punished for religious practice and political opinions.
And bu mana shu chog'da qo'lga kelgan boshqa tizimlik shu tashqi emgaklarni tarbiyalash o'rnida shu chog'dagi shu imlaniki emgaklarni tarbiyalash.
This is the main list of those legal political prisoners' names. The whole list of the people who spent time together with me at that labor camp in Qashqar.
And bularning hammasi endi bu emgaklarni tarbiyalash o'rni deyilgan bo'lgandan bular emgak orqali jazolanadigan.
Just like how it is names applies at the labor camp, everyone is forced to do all types of hard labor and face punishment.
Endi yakshanba kunisi bir kun dam olamiz, qolgan 6 kunda har bir odam bir kunda shu emgak bilan shug'ullanish kerak. Andan keyin bir kunda shu 2 kvadrat 2 metr qurilish qilishgan she'rni qizib tayyorlash kerak.
We only rest on Sunday, and then the other days we always have to work. And everyone has a quota or duty to complete. Everyone has to dig 2 cubic meters of gravel each day.
Agar bu vazifa tugmasa, kashda xulosa ijro bo'lgan chog'da soqchilar vazifani tugatmaganlarni elektr tok kaltak bilan urib jazolaydi.
Anyone who are unable to complete the duty, it will be beaten by the electric buttons on the evening report meeting.
Şu anda bu vazifani tamamlash uchun hamma odam jon tikib ishlaydi. Emgakning yig'ilib tufaylidan bu yerda biz aytganda qaqsab qo'pab belimizni lati bilan temib olamiz. Serb itimiz yerlik ketadi, yerlik ketadigan mana anglish bilan shuni saqlash uchun.
To complete the quota, each person works extremely hard and causes severe damage to their body. Like each morning, we had to wrap around a tight cloth over our belly to prevent abdomen injury?
Çünkü bunda hollarda cık buldu. Nurgun aşağıdaki cinayetçiler hem de cinayetçiler atalgılar. Bulaşık işleş jarayonida emgek ig'ir bo'lg'achqa serib natijalarga kiritilgan va boshqa kasalliklarga dalga qoldi. Bu yerda doktorlik mulozim bo'lmag'achqa vaqti davolanmay nurg'un odam bir umr kasal azobida qoladi, ba'zilari shu yerda o'lib ketadi.
This is a usual injury. Many people have the abdomen injured, and there is no medical service at the labor camps. Without urgent care, they usually end up with lifelong injuries. Some died in the labor camps, especially for the weaker ones.
Aynı çağda ben de 18 ay qamoqxonada yotgan bo'lg'achqa, men uzun mezgil qamoq yemak yeyishimgan ekan. Mening og'irligim 45 kilo chiqib qolgan shu mezgilda. Shunda bo'lg'achqa u angak manga og'ir keldi. Hatto menda mishar ilib yurgan bo'ldi deb başına xiyal qildim. Ammo yana atrofimdagi boshqa jinoyatchilarning yordami bilan shu angaklarga chidab oxiri keyin o'tganlar.
Back then, I was already staying for 18 months at the punishment camp. Because of lack of food, my weight dropped to 45 kilograms. The heavy duty made me hopeless, and I thought I was going to die there. But I eventually made it because of other people's assistance.
Keyin biz u Sheffield Tasbashdan bir xundan o'tgandik. Bu xundandimi ishning og'irligidan nurg'unlagan shu jinoyatchilar qochib oldilar.
Okay, later I was transferred to a brick factory from the digging gravel work, and we had to produce and make bricks. Due to the overload labor, some will try to escape.
Endi bu qochqonlar agar tutilsa qattiq jazolanadi, andan keyin uningki jazo muddati aslida uzartiriladi.
Due to overload labor, some will try to escape, but if they were caught, they will be punished and have their term extended every year.
Endi bu emgaklarning hammasi haqsiz. Bu faqat jazolash tipidagi bir xil harakat bo'lg'achqa, endi u nurg'un bunga hech qanday aqm berilmaydi. Andan keyin shu emgaklarni tarbiyalash o'rni har xil shirkatlardan to'xtam tuzib, ularning emgakini qilib turdi. Buni shu shahar jinoyatchilar haqsiz tamomlaydi.
These all labor camps and the forced labors are all unpaid. None of us get any payment.
No.
And okay, we were also assigned to the personal works labor camps.
Hatta ba'zida bu soqchilarning shaxsiy ishlarini qilamiz. Masalan, soqchilarningki urug' tuqqanlarni dehqonchilik ishlarini qilgan, hatto uyini tozalab bolasini o'qitgan ishlarni qilish qilsak.
We were also assigned to do different works, like even doing some personal work for labor camp wardens, such as house cleaning of the people who manage us at the labor camps.
2017 yılı 8. ayda Şarkı Türkistan vaziyetine
Okay, also just the one sentence addition. The ones at labor camps were also forced but for free, and the ones who runs the labor camps use these workforce to make profit.
2017 yılı Şarkı Türkistan vaziyetine ciddi özgürlük oldu. Tayyip'inki tuyuksuz bu hücumu Fed'den 2017 yılı 8. aydan ilan edip Amerika'ya teşvik ettim.
There has been change in 2017 in the situation of East Turkestan for the Uyghur people. In 2017, I escaped to the United States with my family.
Ben kelib uzatmay 10. ayda ayolımның yenisi lagerga akirib ketildi. 11. ayda mening bir inim akirib ketildi lagerga.
Not long not long after I came to the United States. In October, my wife's two younger brothers were arrested. In November, my younger brother was arrested. This happened to millions of Uyghurs, all locked in the concentration camps.
Андыкен біз жыл әндеш қылдық бұлан ақпалдың. Бір айны алдыда аялымның бір енесі қойып берілді әмәс, әпті түккен кәмптің шығып жазалар көрген. Әпті түккен өйді тұрдыған, башқы жағда бір залықты ішлейдіған, ішлейдікен біздің қарағанымызда.
After Kenya, we were really concerned about the arrested relatives' conditions, and we really hope that they are safe. A month ago, I heard one of my brother-in-law was released from the concentration camp. But we were very happy, but I heard that he can only return home on the weekends and return to the labor on weekdays. And this is also forced labor. He and his family doesn't know how long the forced labor will last.
Demek endi Şarkı Türkistan'da Uyghur halkı ızçı türde müçüdaksız emekten tutulgan emas. Bu hem Şarkı Türkistan Uyghur halkındaki namratıktan tutulanması Türkiye mühim sebeplerinin.
In a word, the people of East Turkestan never were released from the forced labor. They were always forced to do forced labor, and this is one of the main sources that the East Turkestan people never were elevated from the power to. They were always poor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Now we have Lisa.
The world owes Citizen Power Initiatives for China a great debt of gratitude for putting together such a comprehensive report. I'll just make brief comments on three actors in this drama: the Chinese government and government companies, the U.S. government, and the brands. For the Chinese government, if this is such a large enterprise, planned in advance and documented in order to convey the government's policy to every county in the autonomous region, why is it that so little is known about it? It requires digging, prodigious research. As the authors point out, there are obvious attempts to conceal from the outside world the actual plan, deleting online information as soon as it comes to other people's attention that there's revealing information on the internet, changing the names of factories to confuse anyone who would look into them, adding layers of complicated company ownership, the conglomerates with subsidiaries, and they take other extreme measures to disguise these factories and farms as schools and as innocuous trading companies. So this in itself, taken as a whole, is an admission that the government's plan is not fit for the world's gaze. However, the researchers have found some telling clues in addition to that I'd like to point out that Lian Shao didn't have time to explain. First, it should be very clear that prison authorities in the judicial system, and then authorities in the extrajudicial system, and the authorities in the XPCC prison system, all are dual-hatted. They have a role as head of the correctional administration, and they have a role in a company or a conglomerate that's in charge of commerce with cotton and of course the other industries. So that should be a clear red light. Another red light or alarm should be raised when you see that ordinary workers across China, everyone under Chinese rule has to pay their Social Security, payroll taxes, and you have large companies that report very few workers paying, but large profits and large assets. So as the report asks, if you have a company with, 800 million yuan in annual revenues, but with only 3 or 20 workers paying into the worker payroll tax system, the question is, who's doing the labor? It must be forced labor. By law, prison labor, prisoners do not pay into the Social Security system. And then the most chilling piece of evidence that we are grateful to be able to see now is an advertisement for a company selling garments, advertising the advantages of its garments because they're produced in a prison. So, the 5 key advantages of prison garment manufacturing. The cost is very low, as prisoners are not paid a regular wage. 2, our workers, they're saying, are much easier to manage than those in regular factories because we have, quote, a fully militarized system. Third point is our supplies will be able to supply you customers in a stable way, as our workers have to stay for years and even for a lifetime in prison, unlike regular factories where workers are free to come and go. And there are 5 points in this advertisement. One of them is particularly chilling once you look at it. It says, the workers are skilled because they have several years of training. So boasting about the skills of these workers because they've been forced to gain skills in order to produce products for sale. So we have clear evidence of extensive forced labor for these companies and clear evidence that government is trying to hide it. The government understands it's illegal in the U.S. to import any forced labor product, and there is, of course, a moral revulsion, and so this is the need for secrecy. So the question is, what about action? The U.S. government should be enforcing, of course, its laws against the importation of forced labor products. It's the Customs and Border Protection Commission that's responsible, and little known fact that the 2015 law, the Trade Facilitation and Trade Enforcement Act of 2015, which updated and closed a loophole in the original law banning forced labor products, which goes back to 1930, the Tariff Act of 1930, eliminated the exception for consumer need, and also added an annual reporting requirement. So there should be a report every year on compliance with Section 307 of the Tariff Act of 1930, reporting on the number of instances that merchandise was denied entry pursuant to this law. So this is something that UHRP and others endorse full and transparent reporting by the U.S. government about its actions to enforce this law. And then finally, the companies. The report names companies, as Lin Chow just did, very big names, from Disney, lots of products, familiar names, to a lot of cashmere being produced, to Adidas, H&M, Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, Nike, and others. So these companies also agree with the standard that forced labor is unacceptable, and I'll just give you a sample ethics statement from one of the largest suppliers from the cotton industry in the Uyghur region. So Esqual conglomerate, Esqual Group, based in Hong Kong, has a 5E culture. The 5 E's are ethics, environment, exploration, excellence, and education. These 5 E's form the foundation of our approach. So clearly, my organization, the Uyghur Human Rights Project, joins with Citizen Power to call upon Esqual and other companies to live up to their own ethics codes. I will report one more development, which is after some tremendous investigative reporting by the Australian network, ABC, the Business and Human Rights Resource Center asked 11 brands what they were doing to conduct due diligence on their own supply chain. Asked 9 brands for their responses to this reporting. 9 responded. They asked 11. So some of them responded that they had instructed suppliers to stop sourcing yarn from the factory highlighted by that ABC report. Adidas responded that it had also asked suppliers to suspend sourcing of yarn following its investigation, and that it's waiting on the results of independent third-party investigation. IKEA responded that some of its sub-suppliers are in Xinjiang, but that the cotton is sourced according to the Better Cotton Initiative. So this is a common theme for companies to say, we have hired an accreditation firm, and we've been assured that there's no forced labor in our supply chain. In this case, the Better Cotton Initiative. There's also a company called Worldwide Responsible Accredited Production, RAP. This was the company that had certified the factory where Badger Software was sourcing its athletic apparel, which the company was forced to, through, again, tremendous investigative reporting, suspend and then end importing products because of clear evidence that the factory, the Tiantaida, was producing its products through concentration camp labor, Uyghurs detained on the basis of their ethno-religious identity and forced to labor. Clearly, the responsibility lies on the part of the U.S. government to end these crimes against humanity. The U.S. government and other responsible governments to step up enforcement of their own laws and take the next step and understand that there, in fact, is no practical way to distinguish between legitimate cotton products and prison-tainted products, as this report has pointed out. And certainly the burden is on every brand and every consumer to ensure that their own practices are not tainted by these terrible crimes. Thank you.
Thank you for your wonderful summary and comments and action plans. Now we open to questions. So whoever asks questions, please introduce yourself briefly and keep your question short. Thank you.
My name is John Churchill. I come from Democratic China Media. I have a question to ask this gentleman. Since the situation in Xinjiang is so serious, I want, if possible, for people in Xinjiang to go to street like people in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Can you just repeat the last bit, the last part of the question, please?
Okay. I want, if possible, for people in Xinjiang go to street like people in Hong Kong.
Onda mümkünçülük lazım yok.
It's impossible for people, the Uyghurs in Australia.
Burun 85-yili, 88-yili ve ondan keyin o'quvchilarninki namoyishi bo'lgan. 2009'dagi namoyishmi aslida o'quvchilarning namoyishi bilan boshlangan.
It was possible in 1985, 1988, even the protests in 2009 that happened in Urumqi. It was initiated by the students.
Lekin bu namoyishlarning hammasi tez boshlanib, oxirgi bo'lib hukumatninki qo'lliq bilan bostirishib uchirdi va ba'zi voqeaga aylandi.
Although those protests at the beginning began as a peaceful protest, very peaceful, people got on the street, demonstrated peacefully, but it faced severe crackdown by the Chinese authority and all was repressed.
Şuna agar Sharqiy Turkistonda mening o'yimcha nurg'un odam shu Hong Kongga o'xshash shunday demokratiyaning bo'lishini, shunday odamning ko'chaga chiqib o'zining o'yini hukumatga bildirishni orzu qiladi.
I believe many people in East Turkestan really hope that they at least have a freedom and a democracy that at least the Hong Kong people has. They really wish to get on the street, express their views, and express their views towards the government and what they think and their thoughts. But it's impossible for visitors because they really wish to, but they are unable.
Thank you. Safwan from Anadolu Agency. I have a question for you, sir. How do you see, how do you evaluate the U.S. government reaction on what's going on in Xinjiang and toward Uyghur people? And the second question, you said you escaped to U.S. I just want to, get more detail about that journey. Did you get help from the U.S. government, or how is that process going on? Thank you.
Bu kişiden sonra eski birisiyle sizden olmuşu Şinjan'ın aktarılmış bölümlerine kullanılması nispeten Amerika'nın bir polisinin parasını kullanıyorsunuz. İkincisi aslında haber çıktan olmuştu. Amerika'daki özgürlüğün sepetlerine
Şarq Türkistan meselesi, cümleden Uyghur meselesi izchil turda xalqlardan kichik bir masala bo'lib kelgan.
The bigger problem and East Turkestan issue, it's just to continuously kind of became the smaller, it's less concerned issue in the world.
Ya bunun arka sebepleri var.
And there are many reasons for that.
Endi bu qatam şu jazo lagerining chiqishi bilan Xitoy Kompartiyasining Uyg'urlarga bo'lgan qattiq bostirish tufaylidan hozir dunyo bu Uyg'urlarning ahvolini, Sharq Turkiston ahvolini bildi.
And since the Chinese government, initiated the concentration camp, opening up millions of people in the concentration camps, and the bigger issue, the Chinese crackdown towards Uyghur people, it's severe and it get kind of intensified. That made the bigger issue to relevant to the world.
Amerika hükümeti bunun nispeten aktif rol oynadı ve bu Uygurların kişilik hukukunu sözleştirmede başlamcılık rol oynadı.
The American government is playing a leading role in protecting the rights of Uyghurs and concerning the paying attention towards this issue right now.
Lekin Uygurlarning hozirgi ahvoliga nisbatan mening qarshimda Amerika hukumatining qilganlari deb yetarli emas.
However, looking at the situation what's happening to Uyghurs, whatever the U.S. government is doing is not enough.
Agar yana xalqaro jamiyat yoki Amerika hukumati boshqa xalqaro jamiyat kishilik huquq organlari, jumladan Birlashgan Millatlar Tashkiloti agar Uyg'ur masalasida jiddiyroq harakat qo'llansa, balkim texnik cho'ng fojialar meydon kelishi mumkin.
If international community, U.S. government as well as human rights organization doesn't do more and doesn't put more pressure on Chinese government, we may face even more tragedies.
And ikinci sualımızda
For your second question?
ikincisi çünkü ben burun türümde yatkan babacığa 2017 3. aydan başlap Xitoy hükümeti Uygurlarını jazolarga qamagan chaqda birinchi ola burun tutilganlarni burun türümde yatkanlarni qamdi.
When the Chinese government started to detain people in concentration camps, especially from April 2017, the first people who were detained were the people who were arrested before and in prison before. Like myself.
İkinci Türkümde Xitoy hükümeti tizimlik tuzgan 26 devlet, bularning ko'pi islom devletleri, mush devletlerge bağlan hatırsı bağ adamlar tuttu.
And the second round of detention, the targeted people who detained was the people who traveled to 26 countries with Chinese government specifically listed. And the most of that 26 countries are the Islamic countries, Muslim countries.
Meniki nammo shu mezgilda mening do'stlarim tutildi. Shularning ahvolini bunda xatarlikni bilib sayohat vizasi orqali Amerikaga kirishib keldim.
And at that time, even some of my friends started to be detained and arrested. So I saw that I didn't see no future there. It seems to me very dangerous. So I escaped the U.S. with the tours here.
Hi, my name is Patrick Hamilton. I'm with the U.S. Department of State's Office to Monitoring Combat Trafficking in Persons, JTIC. I work on the annual Trafficking in Persons report, and I work on the China narrative. I just want to say thank you so much to this group of people, to the Uyghur Human Rights Project, for continuing to be such a thorough and authoritative source gathering these stories and these accounts, which have helped us to at least try and help our own government, our own people understand what's happening. And thank you again for sharing your experiences today. One of the things that we're really interested in learning more about is the extent to which the Chinese government is beginning to employ these same tactics, these same models of detention, forced labor, as part of re-indoctrination or re-education in other provinces as well. We've heard of a little bit of that, but I'm curious to see if you're starting to see this crop up elsewhere in China, and if so, where?
Certainly, there were public reports of security departments in places in northern and southern China visiting the Xinjiang authorities to learn from their methods of maintaining stability, as they call it, or suppressing trouble. But as our organization concentrates on bringing forth a Uyghur voice on their experiences and the violations of their internationally recognized human rights, we're not the right group to provide that data for you. I don't know if China Initiative is conducting that kind of research.
Yeah, we don't have data available, but we do have a lot of stories. Actually, this public information. Number one, there is a massive surveillance system watching people everywhere that experimented in Tibet, then moved to Xinjiang to massively implement it there. Now it's moved to the rest of China. That's for sure. Another thing is usually during the sensitive time, many sensitive time in each year in China. For example, the two conferences in March of this year, obviously the Chinese authority were using the tactics that we used in Xinjiang to control, to preserve the stability. So we have a lot of stories. In the future, we may engage in this kind of research and come up with their exact data about what's going on in China. So actually, we're trying to do research on surveillance system, and related to that, we want to call the U.S. government to sanction those companies, both Chinese and American, and other foreign companies who have helped China build that system. So that's the legislation we want to push through, and for that we want to come up first with a good research report on that. So once that is done, we will share.
Just in addition to Louisa and Yangeli's comment regarding to this, there's, according to Radio Free Asia, some articles, the bigger detainees who transferred from East Turkestan to mainland China, the detention facilities is more severe than the ordinary Chinese detention facilities in mainland China. The prison system is very strict and very severe towards those transferred Uyghurs who are located in mainland China. That means kind of the system is a bit transferred for Uyghurs, according to Radio Free Asia article.
Nathan Weininger with 21 Wilberforce. My question is for Louisa. Thank you for the report and thank you for your comments on it. Louisa, you spoke a little bit about a section of law that constrains or is supposed to restrict forced labor products from entering the U.S. What are some other pieces of law or actions that perhaps Congress could take to help confront not only the cotton situation in China, but also the general issue of oppression and putting people in camps?
Thank you very much for that question. There is pending legislation in the Congress, the Uyghur Human Rights Policy Act, as well as another bill in the House, the Uyghur Intervention and Global Humanitarian Unified Response Act. These have broad support, bipartisan support in the Congress, but have not passed yet. So certainly we are calling urgently upon the Congress to act. And both these acts and other pending legislation focus on the technology, because American companies are supplying component parts, conducting joint research with Chinese companies that are using Xinjiang as an experimental base to develop even more intrusive surveillance techniques, and then providing research and also sales. The research actually goes two ways. It's not only private companies that are making money through cooperating with Chinese companies that are supplying the surveillance state, which is violating rights every day in China, but also universities in the US. And particularly when we're looking at personally identifiable information, facial recognition, advances in voice print recognition, potentially using iris scanners and other developing technologies that require large amounts of data. China in general, but certainly the Uyghurs as a victim population that cannot lift a voice at all, are subject to, as everyone knows, universal collection of DNA, for example, blood samples, and many people, many victims, like many gentlemen have talked about, being forced to stand in front of a camera and read the same words over and over again, and then they look up and they say, read it again. So reading one text 10, 20, 30 times in a row, what's the purpose? It's clear that this is purpose to collect data to develop better voice recognition software. And for any American or international company to be cooperating on this, potentially these are good technologies that help consumers for their convenience or even health in the hands of an authoritarian government with China that does not respect privacy, that's collecting this data without the consent of those providing the data, and then a government that's turning around and using this to target, to racial profile, and to detain millions of people on the basis of their ethno-national identity is completely unacceptable for any private sector actor or any academic researcher. Completely violates all standards of academic and research ethics. So for Congress to conduct hearings or to look more closely into having to regulate this if universities and companies cannot police themselves.
Any more questions?
Hi, my name is Tim Silva. I'm with Personal Strategies. My question is, what are the specific mechanisms that the U.S. government has employed so far, or that have been effective in freeing Uyghur populations? That's a question to anyone.
Aiding the Uyghur?
Sort of ameliorating some of the symptoms that have been addressed here.
Not much.
So the U.S. government has spoken early and at very high levels of condemning these mass atrocities, in line with leaders of other countries. This provides an international expression of revulsion, not only at massive human rights violations, but really remembering the nightmare of the 20th century, the nightmare that led to the creation of the United Nations. What happened in World War II with, on a very large scale, cruel targeting of ethno-religious minorities for segregation, concentrating them gradually from ghettos into camps, destroying their places of worship, destroying their cemeteries, as everyone knows, throughout areas of German occupation, destroying religious sites, and allow that to continue year after year. We know from the nightmare of the 20th century that these things develop not all at once, that they go on and on. So it's very important for this to be an international response. So I'm expanding with my answer to include a leadership by Vice President Prince Secretary Pompeo, many leading members of Congress in the Senate and the House, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, have spoken. Some other government leaders are speaking. It seems to take a lot of effort for them to do so. They are all still afraid of offending China and afraid of the Chinese government conducting either economic or diplomatic retaliation. But clearly those voices need to be louder. But beyond that, to repeat, sanctions on the perpetrators through the Global Magnitsky Act must come, as well as visa denials for the perpetrators, which is something that's within the power of the State Department to do immediately. We also call upon universities to take action. We also call upon all governments engaged in any kind of negotiation with the Chinese government to condition any agreements on the closure of these camps.
But there is no action yet. That's what we really hope there is some action happens, like at least Global Magnitsky Act, punish those CCP leaders who are responsible for detaining millions of people and causing these atrocities.
The major perpetrator of this atrocity is Chen Quanguo, who is the party chief of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, as well as the ex-PCC. He's the first political commissar of ex-PCC. So he's the person that really responsible for all these atrocities. We have been calling to sanction him through the Magnitsky mechanism. Hopefully that, I think the momentum is picking up. I think right after maybe the trade deal, we can get some announcement from the White House.
Many congressional leaders have advocated that Chen Quanguo should be put on the sanction list of Magnitsky Accountability Act. And just 2 weeks ago, Vice President Pence had a meeting with 4 human rights activists, including Oma and myself. In that meeting, we presented a list of the Xinjiang officials that should be sanctioned, should punish through that act. Chen Quanguo, of course, is number 1 on the list. So we have to make more effort to make that happen.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I? So just a couple of suggestions for advocacy. My name is Scott Brooksy. I'm with the Congressional Executive Commission on China. China is a tier 3 country ranked by the State Department under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, meaning it's the worst situation for human trafficking. To have a tier 3 designation requires the State Department to take some actions, and there's a list of actions in the Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Among those are sanctions on countries, sanctions on individuals who are traffickers, as well as other things like voting against World Bank loans or International Monetary Fund sort of loans for China. That has been the action that has been taken by the State Department the last several years. So they, in response to the tier 3, they have said that they were going to vote against China in international monetary sort of financial systems. So that could be changed, I mean, depending on sort of advocacy. And different tools could be used by the State Department as a suggestion. Secondly, as Louisa pointed out, the exemptions that were in the 1930 Smoot-Hawley Act for consumptive demand, meaning that if you couldn't make it here, then the customs, CPB, couldn't close off access to certain goods. That's been closed. That was closed by something that Sherrod Brown and Chris Smith wrote in 2015. The CPB has gone about enforcing this, and they have also created a special task force for forced labor and child labor. And because I know it's in there, because I wrote it, there is a section where any person can go to CPB with evidence You don't have to have standing. You don't have to be just be a person of interest and provide evidence of certain things, including this cotton report that you have, to ask for an investigation under Section 307. Doesn't have to come from a member of Congress, doesn't have to come from an accredited organization, but you have a lot of accredited organizations here. That can go directly to CPB if that needs to be the case. Third, also, because I've worked on trafficking issues for a while, particularly in cotton in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, there has been a cotton campaign, a global cotton campaign that I think you should probably reach out to, related to Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. So they haven't necessarily, at this point that I know of, been successful in closing off cotton exports from Turkmenistan, but I think that, you know, sort of working with them, I think would probably help your cause as well. Those are just a few things. Please, you know, anyone, my door is open, my email is there. You can contact me if need be, and we can work on these type of things.
Thank you, Scott. Very useful. Thank you for your informing comments. Any more questions? Susie?
Thank you. My name is Sue Taylor, and I'm with the National Affairs Office of the Church of Scientology, and also a participant in the International Religious Freedom Roundtable. And just a quick question, with the effort to expand roundtables around the world to hopefully 100 in this coming year, I was just wondering what more can the faith communities do around the world to help this situation in China?
Thank you very much for your question, Sue. You know, fundamentally, the revulsion that people feel about the exploitation and cruel treatment of others, massive human rights abuses, is at the foundation of why even the Chinese government recognizes that it has to hide what it's doing. Not only because of the consequences, but because they recognize there's a reason why everyone thinks it's wrong. That's why the Chinese government has to round up other human rights abusers to write a joint letter defending the Chinese government's record in rounding people up and conducting 21st century ethnic cleansing. So faith communities, of course, are part of the universal conversation about common human standards. So the religious roundtable, international religious roundtables have a special feature, which is that people from all faith backgrounds and no faith background come together, and simply by participating, they affirm that religious freedom there's no such thing as religious freedom for one group. It has to be religious freedom for all. And so this kind of common voice is very helpful. And for any religious communities globally that want to help the Uyghurs, particularly for Muslim voices, to speak up and point out that despite the Chinese government's intense efforts to use economic and political pressure for them to be silent, to commend their bravery in speaking up is an important point of moral support. And we're also, of course, looking for political support for the legislation in the U.S., fundraising support. It's all very welcome.
Just to add to that, Sue, I think we're going to circulate a letter to CPB, as Scott suggested, ask them to ban the importation of cotton and textile garment products from Xinjiang, specifically based on the evidence we have. And so far, I think we're going to circulate that letter soon. Hopefully, the roundtable organization will sign on that letter. And I think this report actually already produced some good results. We heard from government, particularly ICE, they're going to investigate some of these crazy interferences. So far, so good.
Could I add one more specific thing? Thank you. I know people there have been a lot of questions about particular advocacy focus, all very welcome. But people should also think about the fact that the government of China has succeeded in being awarded the 2022 Olympics. The Winter Olympics in 2022, if all of it goes ahead, athletes will be celebrating the Olympic spirit of international friendship, human development, and well-being in a country that has massive forced labor throughout its cotton industry and this, again, massive roundup of Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims and religious believers, tremendous crackdown on the house churches, and continued persecution of the Falun Gong. So for any concerned communities, sign the little joint letter to the International Olympic Committee. It's online. The hashtag is No Rights, No Games 2022. The head of the International Olympic Committee should be taking responsibility for saying, is it on our shoulders to go ahead and hold this celebration in the capital of a country that's continuing these crimes? So participation in that joint letter to the International Olympic Committee would be also quite welcome.
Yeah, add to that, China made tremendous promises to IOC when they were trying to get it granted for 2008 Olympic in Beijing. We should hold IOC responsible too, to tell us, what China did to keep its promise, and if they didn't, what IOC should do. And this time we should talk to IOC about that and apply pressure on IOC too. Any other questions?
Given that the Uyghurs are majority, if not totally, Islamic population, what responsibility do you think Islamic countries such as Saudi Arabia have to protect Muslims in China and not be so amicable, if you will, with Chinese?
Asli Uyg'urlarninki bu masalasiga hozir Xitoyninki kontrabandisi asos bo'lgan tarafini yana e'tiqod.
The bigger issue, the main source of the China's target is because of the Uyghurs live in Islam, the religious belief.
Asli qoida bo'yicha islom davlatlari ovoz chiqarib Uyg'urlarning bu masalasiga ko'ngil bo'lishi kerak. Lekin unday qilmaydi.
In reality, the Islamic countries should stand up for Uyghurs and stand against the Chinese policies.
Çünkü İslam devletlerinin mutlak köpü Xitoy bilan manfaat munosabati bor.
Most of the Islamic country has the trade relationship with China.
Biz şu anda İslam devletindeki xalqlarni unutmaymiz.
We only hope that the people, the civilians of the Islamic country is probably help us what we got.
Hang on, just a history.
Oh yeah.
Yaqinlarda Qatar hukumati Xitoyni qo'llagan bayonotdan chekinish chiqqan. Bu qarshi olgan ham qo'shilgan bir ish.
The thing that we were very happy about one of the Muslim countries, Qatar, because Qatar withdrew the support of the Chinese government towards the policy.
Bazı devletlerdeki İslam gülmaları ve bazı teşkilatlar Uygurlarni qo'llab ovoz chiqaradi. Bunun anında tırnak yapışıdır yüzümüz.
But also there is still some hope because some of the people, the Islamic religious figures, Islamic groups in some other countries also support the issue.
Now I think I have to wrap it up. I want to particularly thank my colleague, Dr. Han Chao, the author of the report. That this is a wonderful, excellent work, and also my colleagues who have involved with this work. And I want to invite you to join me in thanking our speakers today. Thank you again for coming. Thank you.